A lot of people believe that transaction coordinator is just about the task. However, how to communicate effectively as a transaction coordinator. As transaction coordinators, clear communication is everything. But beyond just being clear, we also need to be organized and strategic on how we communicate. A lot of people believe that transaction coordinator is just about the task. However, one of the most important things for a transaction coordinator is communication. Maybe even more important than being able to complete the tasks on time. As transaction coordinators, clear communication is everything. But beyond just being clear, we also need to be organized and strategic on how we communicate. One of my biggest rules is always keep things in writing. This helps create a paper trail, which is not only useful for tracking conversations, but also for protecting yourself and your business. It is not uncommon, unfortunately, that an agent and I had different memories of what was agreed upon about certain topics or situations or instructions given. But because I had everything documented in email, we can quickly resolve the misunderstanding without any drama. And some brokerages or agents even request a full copy of communications at the end of the transaction. I personally don't work with anyone who requires this at the moment, at least, but I know some TCs do. So email should always be your primary method of communication whenever possible, but it doesn't mean it is the only method we should use. Another thing to keep in mind is the tone and the professionalism used on the emails, because emails should always be clear, professional, and concise. Avoid the unnecessary fluff, but still warm enough and approachable. Also, be mindful that written communication can sometimes lack tone, so consider how your message might be interpreted. So now let's discuss understanding your client's needs. Understanding your client's needs, obviously, is very important. Real estate agents are constantly on the go with showings, meetings, appointments, so they may not read emails as quickly as we do. That's why I ask my clients what their preferred method of communication is. For most agents, text messages are the easiest and fastest way to get updates. Personally, I love using phone calls for urgent matters like time-sensitive documents or clarifications. Sometimes a quick phone call can save time and prevent miscommunications, but I don't use this resource all the time. I don't want to interrupt anyone unnecessarily. Also, let's be honest, some people just don't have a sense of urgency on calls, and conversations can drag on forever. And a tip that I want to share with you, if you do have a phone conversation, always send a recap email afterwards for reference. Now let's talk about alternative communication methods. In addition to email, text, and phone calls, I also use Slack with some of my clients. This keeps communication organized by transaction rather than getting lost in mixed up text messages. I once had a client using Discord for the same purpose, but I choose not to accommodate because I try to limit my communication channels to avoid spreading myself too thin. Remember, you don't have to use every single platform. You can choose what works best for you and the workflow that you utilize in your operations. Another strategy I use is weekly email updates every Friday before the end of the day. Since I am closed on weekends, this ensures agents have the latest information before I sign off. Some clients also prefer accessing files through a transaction management portal. I use Open to Close, which allows agents to check the progress, documents, and contacts. However, not all of the agents want another login to manage. So I always ask whether they prefer the portal option or just the weekly email update with a one sheet. By the way, a one sheet is a summary of important transaction details like the dates, the contacts, the completed and pending tasks, documents, etc. We all work with busy agents, right? High-producing agents can be hard to reach, which is where personal assistants come in. If an agent has an assistant, I make sure to communicate with them when necessary. They often act as a bridge and they filter calls for the agent, of course, so they can be an excellent ally when needed. Now, for team clients, I also attend the team meetings when possible. This allows me to provide updates, address concerns, and even share training tips. It's a great opportunity to educate agents on how I operate and improve collaboration as well. Now, a tip here for you is to be proactive. If you anticipate an issue, don't wait for the agent to reach out. Communicate early and provide solutions when possible. This reduces the back and forth and build trust. Now, of course, every agent is different, and I love to hear from you. What's the trickiest communication challenge you have faced as a TC? Drop them in the comments. Now, let's talk about setting communication boundaries. I know people don't like that word, but hey, this is something I learned the hard way, unfortunately. So let me share my actual boundaries. So first of all, my business hours. Yes, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. Now, response time expectations. That is something that I definitely talk to the agents when I do an onboard process. Now, weekly policy and after hours, I'm not available. Emergency protocols. In my opinion, there is no such a thing as an emergency. Although I understand that there might be time-sensitive situations, which are normally so common and work hard during the day to get them resolved. If not, I do my best to offer potential solutions before I leave for the day. For example, if the agent thinks that they might be canceling the contract before midnight, I can prepare the cancellation to facilitate the process and just instruct the agent where to find it, or send it by email to the agent only, and the agent will send it for signature. So I'm not going to wait until midnight. So my point in here is I am very, very clear that I'm always available from Monday to Friday during business hours, and I am not available after 5 p.m. and I'm not available during the weekends. And again, it might sound funny, but in my opinion, there are never emergencies. And I believe that we can do our best to be proactive, and that is the approach that I normally take, and that definitely is clearly communicated to all my agents. Now, I always try to reduce the need of constant back and forth. To streamline communication, I define my responsibilities up front, and I talk to the agents about that, and I clearly have instructions on what they want me to do and what are the things that I need approval from them, okay? I also use automated email templates for common updates, and this keeps things efficient while ensuring consistency. Now, let's talk about handling difficult conversations, because unfortunately, not all communications are easy. Sometimes we have to deliver bad news or follow up on overdue tasks or clarify misunderstandings. So that is how I advise you to do that. First, stay professional and neutral. Stick to the facts and avoid emotional responses. Also offer solutions whenever possible, of course, because if there is an issue, let's focus on the solution. And acknowledge and empathize. If an agent is frustrated, let them know you understand their perspective. Now, another thing that I really wanted to, mention is the communication with other TCs. And I want to make sure you understand that every TC operates in a different way, whether due to personal business choices or legal or brokerage limitations. Okay, so never assume another TC will handle things the same way that you do. I always recommend keeping an open mind and confirming responsibilities rather than making assumptions. Respect the fact that every TC has different boundaries and constraints. Now, let's talk about communication with other parties. You might have to communicate with attorneys, maybe for a probate, for a foreclosure, for a trust. You might need to communicate with contractors, with code enforcement officers, and who knows, maybe any other party that is involved. So don't hesitate to pick up the phone and introduce yourself. As always, after a conversation, send a written recap to keep track of it, okay? Now, let's talk about acknowledging messages. And I know that some professionals recommend only replying once that you have an answer to avoid clutter. And I disagree. I train my team to acknowledge emails and texts immediately, or I wouldn't say immediately, but as soon as possible, even if we don't have an answer yet. If I know a resolution will take time, I acknowledge the request and provide an ETA. This reassures the sender and prevents unnecessary follow-ups through multiple channels. And the idea here is to, give peace of mind to the person that sent the request. I don't want to have an email, a text, a voicemail, everything in related to the same thing. That creates kind of more work for me. Also, text should be answered as soon as possible, at least for my team, because people expect a faster response to text than emails. So we try to prioritize whenever possible. Now, is this helping you to refine your communication as a TC? If so, let's stay connected. Hit that like button and subscribe for more tips that will help you run a smoother, more professional business. Now, I also tell my team all the time, email, text, email, text. And they're probably sick of me saying it, but it's a standard in my business because most of my clients only check emails after hours or maybe a few times a day. So if something requires the same day action or attention, I can't rely solely on email. So likewise, buyers and sellers are busy with their own jobs. So to avoid delays, I always text them after sending an important document or a request, and this keeps things moving efficiently. I also do intro calls with the buyers and sellers at the beginning of the transaction to explain my communication process. And for the most part, they really appreciate the proactive approach. And as you can imagine, I not only do intro calls, but I also send the intro emails to all the parties involved. To learn more about that, check the video right here.